Anais Nin offered this world many things: honesty, vulnerability, vision, raw and uncut insight into her life and her perspectives. Through her novels, speeches, short stories, and diaries, Anais Nin challenged conventionally defined gender roles, provided readers with an erotic genre not previously popularized in the West, and became an icon in a feminist movement she wanted no part in. Anais Nin was born February 21, 1903, in France, to Joaquin Nin, a Cuban composer, and Rosa Colmel, a Cuban singer. She and her two brothers were brought to New York City by their mother in 1914 after her father abandoned the family. She married her first husband, Ian Hugo, in 1923. She later married her second husband, actor Rupert Pohl, in 1955 while still married to Hugo. She lived two separate lives on two different American coasts while attempting to keep all of her lies straight. Her marriage to Pohl later had to be annulled for legal reasons, but they remained living together until her death in 1977. Anais Nin had many lovers, most of them renowned authors or notable figures. One of her most famous affairs was with American author Henry Miller. It is rumored that she also had a sexual relationship with his wife June, but she has denied this. She chronicled her relationship with Miller and her obsession with his wife in her journal, calling it Henry and June. Nin launched her literary career in 1932 with the publication of D.H. Lawrence in Unprofessional Study. However, she enjoyed little literary success until the publication of her diaries. The first volume was not published until 1966. Nin's diaries became her most studied and most famous of her works. She began writing in her diary at the age of 11 on the boat from Europe to America. She maintained that the diary began as a letter to her father. She continued to write her diary until the end, but requested that the final volumes detailing her fight with cancer remain unpublished. Once published, the other volumes of her diary made her a famous feminist icon in the 1960s, even though she continuously tried to distance herself from the movement. She said, "I see a great deal of negativity in the women's liberation movement. There is far too much imitation of man in the women's movement. There is merely a displacement of power. Women's definition of power should be different." Anais Nin's writing was often the subject of controversy during her lifetime and even after her death. Some critics appreciated her distinctive illustration of femininity and psychological insight, while others considered her narcissistic and self-absorbed. In her diary, Nin detailed the sexual abuse she experienced at the hand of her father, and later the incestuous relationship they shared. Some of Nin's most controversial work came not only from her diaries, but from her volumes of erotica. In the preface to her piece, Little Birds, she writes, "Before I took up my new profession, I was known as a poet, as a woman who was independent and wrote for her own pleasure. Yet my real writing was put aside when I set out in search of the erotic." Anais Nin battled cervical cancer for almost 3 years before she died on January 14, 1977, in Los Angeles, California, at the age of 73. She was survived by her husband, Rupert Pohl, who became her literary executor. He began to have all the volumes of her diaries published, which were more sexually direct than the original versions. The International Honor Quilt is a collaborative grassroots feminist art project initiated by Judy Chicago in 1980. It consists of a collection of 539 individual quilts that have been made by women or groups honoring individual women, women's organizations, or women's issues. The quilt honoring Anais Nin was contributed by Thea Fletcher of Alberta, Canada in 1982. Thea chose to honor Anais Nin because through her diaries she caught a glimpse of a very exciting vision, where intellect and emotion fuse in a new type of woman. Miss Fletcher also describes Nin's diaries as documents of an outstanding ability to perceive other people. She says Nin helped her, as a young reader of her diary, to recognize herself and feel companionship in her struggle out of the traditional role of a woman and its intellectual confinement. She describes the quilt block as her attempt to show how strong intellect, imaged through geometrical lines and shapes and black and white color, and emotional depth, expressed as warm red color with much variation, combined to a fulfilled human being, a woman, the balanced shape of a triangle. Anais Nin, the woman, the author, the femme fatale, the erotic novelist, gave this world so much. Her life and her words brought with them controversy, sincerity, and love without boundaries, depth and weight. The day came when the risk to remain tight in her bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom, and blossom she did.